All right. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the AERA New Leader Orientation for Sig Officers. A couple of housekeeping items. We are recording today's session, so if you miss anything and want to re-listen, you'll have access to that, and I assume also the PowerPoint presentation. We also have an ASL interpreter with us today. You can find her by searching ASL and then you can also pin her so that she's highlighted. And we also have closed captioning available. All you need to do is go down to where it says live transcript and click on that, and you will have closed captioning. So I'm Michelle Young, and I'm a member of the Sig Executive Committee, and I'll be chairing today a new leader orientation session. I'm stepping in today for Kakali Bhattacharya, who was unable to join us. And today we're going to introduce you to the Sig Executive Committee members, the role that we play in supporting your work with your individual SIGs, and then subsequently we will be guiding you through a set of lessons learned and best practices in leading individual SIGs. Next slide, please. The SIGs, as you know, are a really important part of AERA. All of the members of the Sig Executive Committee are members of one or more SIGs, and we understand that they facilitate the engagement of scholars around research specialties, areas that often cross divisions. They increase the exchange of knowledge and collaboration within our different specialized research areas, and they offer more opportunities for members to actively participate in AERA activities, as well as have leadership positions, such as the ones that you all hold. And as you know, the individual SIGs elect their members to provide leadership for their SIGs. AERA members widely also elect 6 members to the Sig Executive Committee, which operates in support of the SIGs. And on this slide, you see the 6 current members of the Executive Committee, Kakali Bhattacharya, Victoria Shabunmi, me, Michelle Young, Huyad Thomas Janke, and Veronica Valdez, and Jane Lowe. Also on this slide, you see Nathan Bell. He is the staff liaison with the SIG Executive Committee, and he is the Director of Governance for AERA, which essentially means that he is the primary contact for all SIG leaders on pretty much anything that you need related to policies and procedures for governing or managing your SIG. The SIG members are elected to serve 3-year terms. 5 are elected as at-large members, and 1 is elected as a chair. Currently, Kakali is the chair, and Veronica is the chair-elect. 2 members rotate on and off each year, and our 2 outgoing members this year are Arturo Olivares and Kathy Gansky, and they will be leading part of our conversations today. We really appreciate them coming. The SIGs have 4 really key responsibility areas. One of them is to provide operational oversight. A second is making recommendations to AERA Council regarding the establishment of new SIGs, SIG policies such as the awards, and procedures for the formation, operations, and dissolution of SIGs. We're also responsible for implementing SIG policies and for promoting the welfare of SIGs by representing and assisting all SIGs. And as I mentioned before, we are elected members. So today we're going to spend some time talking about some of the best practices and policies and procedures for the SIGs, around 45 minutes. We're going to have time for some Q&A, about 15 minutes. And then we're going to have an opportunity for some breakout sessions with the SIG Executive Committee members, around 20 minutes. And then we'll return again to a Q&A session for about 10. When we were putting today's meeting together, we had a couple of kind of general questions that we thought you may have in your new roles, such as what are my responsibilities as a SIG officer? How do I build a collaborative, cohesive team for my volunteers in my SIG? What kind of policies and procedures do I need to follow? And how do I stay organized and motivated? What are some of our SIG responsibilities? What are my responsibilities? Recognizing and rewarding SIG achievements. And then what resources and best practices can guide me? So now I'm going to turn it over to Nathan, and he's going to take you through some of the next stuff.
So hello, everyone. I'm Nathan Bell. I'm the Director of Governance and Special Projects at AERA. And as Michelle said, I'm basically your primary point of contact for most of the things that you will be responsible for as SIG officers. In addition, there's a few key staff members which are on the screen. I'm sure all of you know Felice Levine, our Executive Director, and you may have occasion to interact with her in your roles. Lori Diane Hill is our Associate Executive Director. Robert Smith is our Director of Meetings. And for those of you who are program chairs or chairs, you'll be working with Robert on meeting relating matters throughout the course of this next year. George Wimberly is our Director of Professional Development. And so you may either see correspondence from him or have a chance to interact with him on professional development throughout the year. And finally, Badut Asharia is our IT Systems Administrator. And Badut is my strength that I lean on when I need help on anything about SIG websites and listservs, et cetera. So I can answer the basic questions, but if there's technical issues, Badut is the one who can actually assist you if there's website or listserv issues. So keep these names in mind. And as Michelle said, I will be sharing this PowerPoint with you, so you'll have this information as well. I wanted to call attention to these 4 items. These are not things that we will cover today, but on the AERA website in the About AERA section, there are 4 documents in particular that relate to your service as SIGs. And if I can just mention right now, if you are listening and you're not muted, just make sure you mute your screen. We're hearing a little background noise every now and then. So one of the things is AERA has a set of bylaws, just like SIGs have their own bylaws. AERA has a set of bylaws which are available on the website. You may want to take a look at those. We have a conflicts of interest document that you should be familiar with, particularly if you are on an awards committee or responsible for oversight of an awards committee. You want to make sure that in that awards process, you're actually following that conflicts of interest document. Third, there's a document on position taking that's available, and you should give that a skim. It mostly relates to if your SIG wanted to put out a statement about some issue and take a position on it, you have to make sure that that's that it is in accordance with the guidelines that are set forth by AERA Council. So most of the time that won't be an issue, but it's something that's good to know that it is there. And finally, there's a code of ethics that all AERA members and SIG officers are required to operate under in our professional lives and also in our service to the association. So it's another document that you want to probably take a look at some point. There is another page which has got a lot of information that you should familiarize yourself with as new SIG officers, and that is the Resources for SIG Officers webpage. If you go to aera.net and click on SIGs at the top of the screen, you'll find a link for Resources for SIG Officers. And there's quite a bit of information here that's really useful to you in your new roles. First of all, there's the Sig Handbook. This is an older version of it. There is a new version that's, we keep saying this, but hopefully this year is the year we're going to get this new version out, which will be a little bit more streamlined and have more helpful things like a timeline, for example. But the Sig Handbook is there, and it really governs and tells you everything about all the policies and procedures that are in place at AERA and all the things that you need to know. And a lot of the stuff we're covering today is also additionally in that Sig Handbook. So it's a good resource to know about. There's also information on that page about how to access your SIG membership and financial tools, and I'll cover that a bit later in today's presentation. There's an award petition form. We'll talk about awards a bit later in this presentation as well. There's also the expense reimbursement form, which is a good one to know. So if you spend money for your SIG, it's how to be reimbursed for that money. So that form is actually on the website as well. And with that, I'm going to turn it, I believe, over to Victoria for just a couple moments.
Hello, good evening, everybody. Really lovely to see you all. And I wish I was actually face to face with you, but we're online. So that's one of those things we're dealing with at this present moment. Hopefully next year it'll be different. So the section I'm going to be talking about is growing and sustaining a community membership. And that's the section I'm looking at. And I've got some slides I'd like to take you through at this present moment.
I think, Victoria, actually, I've got a couple, and then I'll turn it to you. I'll do the policies and
right, okay, yes, okay, sorry, yes.
And the SIG EC will talk about the best practices and advice. No so just very quickly, this is something that's in the SIG Handbook. So there are metrics or qualities of healthy and vital SIGs. And the SIG Executive Committee really looks at these on an annual basis to make sure that SIGs are healthy and vital. And some of the things they look at are Your membership. SIGs are required to have a minimum membership of at least 75 individuals. The Healthy and Vital SIG matrix also includes looking at submission and acceptance rates for the annual meeting, looking at the initiatives that you might have as a SIG, looking at how you're recruiting new members or developing the leadership capacity of existing members. And I think most importantly, although it's the last bullet, is really how are you advancing the knowledge base and disseminating education research in your unique field within education research. SIGs can demonstrate these healthy and vital characteristics by their annual meeting sessions, by newsletters, by other initiatives such as whether they've got a program for mentoring new graduate students, or are they doing a webinar series this year while we're all doing virtual work, or whatever it might be. You can demonstrate the vitality of the SIG through the activities that you're undertaking as a SIG under the leadership of the SIG of your SIG's executive committee. Healthy and Vital SIGs also have an annual business meeting that's held in conjunction with the AERA annual meeting. It's something that we schedule for you. It's this year, for example, it was days 2, 3, and 4 of the annual meeting in the evening. Healthy and Vital SIGs also demonstrate an inclusive nominations and election process that is in accordance with both the guidelines that AERA puts forward, as well as the guidelines that are in your own SIG's bylaws. And finally, something which I'll talk about a bit later today is by a timely submission of an annual report. And that annual report form is really valuable for the SIG Executive Committee to get a sense of what you've been doing throughout the year in your SIG. And with that, now I'll turn it to Victoria.
Thank you very much, Nathan. I mean, something else I'd like to add as well. I mean, it is a fundamental aspect of your SIG is growing and sustaining a community, because your community really reflects on who you are as a team as well. So, and I think that's important. So they actually feel what it is. So what else does it need, say for you as well? Clarification of roles and responsibilities from officers from the start is crucial. And without that, you can be subjected to quite a messy situation, which you don't want to do. Recruit year round, keep membership page updated, add quotes from diverse members so scholars can see themselves in various current roles. And that is really vital, that you don't have the same people doing the same thing and you get a different type of person as well. Keep SIG goals and objectives as guiding points, managing deadlines as a group as well. January to March, send teaser listserv announcements to lapsed members. That's really important as well, because you want them to continue to be able, because the more you get, the higher numbers you get, the more you can actually get active within your SIG as well. Now, the business meeting is a focal point for recruitment, absolutely. And we really encourage all members to bring a guest who might be interested in the content. This way you may have a paper which you've nominated, a best paper, or you may have nominated some other activity, and that's how you really get your SIG members involved, and the wider member involved as well. Underscore for faculty that SIG meetings are great for personal development for graduate students. And also invite journals, editorial boards to join, informal partnerships. These things are really, really helpful. And also alumni of like-minded programs, institutions to attend business meetings to bring SIG visibility as well. Social media, of course, that's something which is you can't go without at this present moment. I mean, the selfie challenges, the Facebook to liven up members, the scholarship, Twitter, all those types of things, Instagram, all these things now are really help to vibrate the actual SIG itself. Continuing to, utilizing call for proposals to lift up the work of the SIG. It's so, so, so important. Share information widely, involve SIG members as much as possible. Ask those presenting at SIG sessions to consider joining. SIG members are ambassadors for the group and the field, and that's really, really important to continue. Now, I believe that I'm passing my next baton on to Achuro. Over to you, Achuro.
Thank you, Victoria. Our next slides will include the whole idea of building community with one of the most important pieces, which is communication. And also included in that communication is how you build that collaboration in a team.
muted. Before Arturo gets into the best practices, I'll once again give you some policies and procedures information. There's 3 general areas I want to cover here, which is your Sig listservs, your Sig websites and social media, and your Sig membership lists. So each Sig is given 2 listservs for you to use. There's an announcement listserv and a lapsed member listserv. The announcement listserv, anyone who joins your Sig is automatically signed up for the announcement listserv. This is a one-way listserv, which allows you and any of the Sig officers to communicate messages directly to your Sig members. So an email to your announcement listserv will instantly reach all of your Sig members. The Sig chair is also given access to the lapsed member listserv, and this is just for, I think, as Victoria just mentioned, is a tool to reach out to those who haven't yet rejoined your Sig but might be interested in doing so. I give all new officers and current officers the access to post to the Sig, to the Sig's listserv. We are just wrapping up that work for 2021 to 2022. And so if you don't have access yet, it should be granted by hopefully the end of this week. One of the things that I've been thinking of doing is we had at one time forum listservs, and these were more interactive where individuals could actually create a conversation, amongst members of the Sig. And so in your annual report form later this year, I'm actually going to ask if you would like to actually have a forum listserv for your Sig. And for those who opt to do so, Renee, if you could mute, thank you. Thank you. For those who might wish to do so, we can actually set up these forum listservs at some point this summer, hopefully. How you use your listserv is up to you. Some Sigs do a digest at the end of the week. Others do things as they come in. It's really up to you. And we can provide more advice on that during Q&A or in the best practices section. I just want to mention that there is an AERA jobs board. You are more than welcome to use your listserv to actually send out information about jobs in your field that your members might be interested in. But you can also, if the individuals contact you saying, would you put this word out there, you can actually also direct them to the jobs board at careers.aera.net. Each Sig is also given a Sig website on the AERA website. You do not have to use that website. You can opt to develop one on your own off the platform. I do encourage you to use the option, even though it's probably not the most glamorous and high tech, but to use the option on AERA's website, because one of the challenges with these external websites is when the officers change, sometimes access to these external websites goes away, and some really good websites either become stagnant and dated, or they just simply disappear. So we will host it. It's at no charge. Sigs are actually responsible for managing the content of those websites, but we actually set up this like a shell structure for you, and you just can fill in, about us, annual meeting information, whatever the topics might be that you want to cover on your website. I get a notice whenever any of you actually send out make a change to your website, and my goal is to approve those within 24 hours, but typically it's faster than that. I should mention also, when I mentioned the listservs, I actually get a copy of all of your listservs as well, so I get lots of email from you on a routine basis. Finally, on websites, all Sig officers have access to edit those websites. Again, we're setting up the access for the 21-22 year. If you don't have access yet, you will very shortly. We are doing 2 webinar training sessions this year for new webmasters. We just set the dates for those this morning. They'll be May 13th and May 14th, both at 2 o'clock Eastern time. Badut Asharia, who is our IT systems administrator, will be actually leading those trainings, and I'll be on chairing those 2 sessions as well. And I will send detailed information a bit later this week. We also encourage Sigs to utilize social media, and we see a lot of Sigs with really active Facebook and Twitter and other such social media accounts. I would just mention that we do provide social media guidelines on that Resources for Sig Officers webpage. And we encourage you to look at that document, which gives you some good tips, first of all, but then also some guidelines about, as a Sig, things you should know about when, tweeting or putting a post on Facebook as a Sig. I should mention also that if you want a logo for your Sig, our communications team has developed those. Many of you use those on a regular basis. If you don't have a copy of that logo, please email the communications team at communications sig@aera.net. And Tong Wu, who is the communications associate, will send you a whole bunch of GIFs and whatever format pictures that you can use on your social media and other places for your SIG. Finally, the last thing I wanted to cover in this section is, in addition to the resources for Sig Officers webpage, you actually have access to your membership and financial tools in a member-only section of the AERA website that's actually tied to your login. So if you go to aera.net and you click login at the top of the screen, you'll either be taken to, or you can click on the My AERA page. And from there, you'll see member resources and then special interest group tools. And from that special interest group tools page, you'll actually be able to view the financial statements for your SIG. The financial statements are monthly. They typically lag a few weeks behind the month. So I believe March is up there now, but April won't be up until probably more toward the end of May, until when the books are closed for the month. If you ever need a more recent report than the one that's available, just email me at sigs@aera.net. That's SIGS@aera.net, and I can get you a more updated copy of your financial report. I can also answer questions because sometimes the things that are on those reports don't quite make sense. So I'm used to seeing them. I'm happy to help interpret what some of the charges may or may not be. From this, these special interest group tools, you can also see your lists of current, new, and it doesn't say it, but lapsed members as well. These lists are downloadable, so you can actually use that as a way to contact members. I do recommend that the best way to contact members is through the Listserv, because members are automatically updated to that as they join your SIG. So it's in real time that you'll see both this list and the Listserv. You'll have an accurate way to reach all of your members. With that, I'll turn it to Arturo.
Very good. Well, with all this plethora of tools and resources, there is no excuse for you to basically move your SIG from where you found it, if this is the first time you become a chair or a co-chair, to where you want to go. So clarifying your goals and objectives as to what you want to achieve this next year is very important. And the only way you can do it is through building a very good collaborative team with your co-chair, with the program chair, treasurer, and secretary. If you have that formation, very important that everybody knows that there is a team. You cannot do these things by yourself. So building the community is, first of all, to you as a chair communicate very clearly where do you want to take that group to. Internal communication, goals, coordinating around the key events. There's a lot of things that you can plan, schedule, but again, you need a team to help you in collaborating with these events. Passing on the SIG knowledge. Again, a lot of times people do stay even though they're not part of the executive committee of your SIG. You can always rely on those people that have that history. So the incoming officers like you rely on other people that have done it. Have a place to also host these SIG documents if the previous chair did not do it. Plan to do it this time. Create a SIG strategy for diverse communication. You need to be inclusive. Although you are a professional community, you need to also remind people of what are your chair norms and values. What is your collective focus? Of course, membership and the kind of research, quality research that you want to produce. But ultimately, you want to build a collaborative team. Another practices that you can do using technologies is the Google Hangouts with your officers. Don't wait for they to call you. You need to start initiating. If you were a member before and now you are in the position of a leader, you have to start planning monthly, bi-weekly, bi-monthly, whatever it is, whatever media you get to use, you got to use it. Another aspect of building community is the individual mentoring. You start with your team, your executive team, then with the members. Victoria talked about building that capacity in terms of numbers. It's very important that communication is your best tool all the time throughout the year. Group communication, again, we used to use via email. Now I basically said, I need to talk to you, and I create an MS Teams meeting in the instant. a Zoom meeting or whatever, Skype. There's a lot of those new tools that we can use. And of course, Nathan is a great resource because he uses a lot Dropbox, and I really enjoyed it because he organized us in many different ways. You can organize your team through that media. Next. In terms of external communication, again, some goals to keep in mind. Be sure that you keep your SIG members informed. There are SIGs that sometimes they send something and they say, oh, I need to send something. No, you need to have a monthly, bi-monthly newsletter, one-pager, whatever it is, so that they stay engaged. Always keeping in mind that you have to always be recruiting new SIG members. Connect with other SIGs and divisions. There's also, it is allowed to, not to steal, but to then get people interested in what you're doing, share those norms and values with others. In terms of practices and technologies, Listserv for maintaining the membership, Facebook groups, that's just to do the outreach and keeping people engaged. Twitter, same. Google Hangouts, and for just answering questions and answers with the offices, the executive team, and other members that are interested in finding out as to where the SIG is going. Other ideas that we can share with you, again, a newsletter is nice, but I know that we are very busy professors and professionals. But again, one-pager newsletters are okay. Google Hangouts, like we mentioned before, are other things that you can use in podcasts. Next. In terms of mentoring, again, remember, this is all about growing your membership, about keeping the communications lines open for everybody. Try to diversify those practices as you identify who might be needing somebody that you want to groom for the next team. Consider a timeline to allow time for matching. A lot of times people forget that, not everybody is a mentor. I sometimes I've seen more as a tormentor, okay? Especially with my students. So tormentor and mentor are two different things. Let's make sure that you try to match correctly. Consider talks by senior scholars in your SIG, but not necessarily in your SIG, but other divisions that you belong to. In terms of that relationship, it's a very sensitive relationship, but it's a very important one. Proposal mentoring, content mentoring, mentoring office hours. People now can do it at a distance. They don't have to come to your office. Right now, I'm in my office, but it's so difficult because some students cannot even come to the office because the campus is closed. Anything like ideas for topics, again, constructing a professional identity, maybe academic writing teams, collegiality, the whole idea of teaching, external funding. You have got also as a chair and executive team, you have to also look for resources for your SIG, okay? Life career balance, sometimes you have to figure out what gives and what doesn't. And again, preparing people, in terms of mentoring, preparing people for the 3rd year or 10-year reviews, very important for some of the young members of your committee, of your SIG. Some of the logistics, again, try to set up no more than 2-hour sessions if you want to create that mentoring team. Get a room that is larger than you think. And in this case, it doesn't matter because Zoom or MS Team will allow us. Schedule a middle in the middle of the conference, especially if we were to be in person. Right now, you can still do a lot of mentoring away at a distance. Encourage pairs to meet outside mentoring meetings. And again, this is kind of like the old way we used to do it. We hope to do it next year. And some of these, I think, logistics apply. And again, plan on someone not showing when you set up something like this. Continue on. Thank you.
So I think Huya is here now.
Sorry, we've got daylight saving changed and I didn't change the time, however. So the next one is linked a lot to what Arturo has been talking about in terms of the annual meeting planning and sharing your community research. I was just reminding people what the theme and what the theme is, and the interests with the interactions within that theme, publicising, including with others like Sigs and sister Sigs, and then sharing with other sessions, and you can do this by attending each other's Sigs and organising other symposiums. Oh, is that me?
This is your slide, yes.
Yeah. So between the annual meetings, some of the things you can do is to share other symposiums and newsletters between you, and look at collaborating in various publications and various research and grant applications as a group with others. And then at the annual meeting together, and also doing it in terms of regional research associations, not necessarily leaving it till you get to the meeting. And then having special journals for your Sigs and other kinds of publications and special issues, and perhaps even putting out book series of the various dissertations and the winners from the paper awards that you might have as well.
So if I can add one thing to that, Julia, which is that when it comes to journals and books, there are actually very specific rules about the process by which Sigs would do those things, which are outlined in the Sig Handbook. And I'm more than happy to talk to Sigs who are interested in doing those things as well. We kind of changed the order on the fly there. So I want to go back up and talk about a couple of things about the timeline and logistics for the meeting. So this is a generic timeline based on how things typically unfold for the 2022 annual meeting. The dates on this are being worked out right now and may change slightly from what they were last year or the year before. So just watch for communication from us about what the actual dates are for the 2022 annual meeting. But in general, in April is when we put out the call for volunteer reviewers. That has gone out. This is the time when your Sig will actually be putting together, we'll be calling for reviewers who will actually make up the review panels within your Sig. The call for submissions will go out in May this year. I'm not sure the exact date yet. And at the same time, the portal for submissions is opened. The portal typically closes in July. I know last year we kept it open until August because of the uncertainty about the pandemic. I'm not sure what will happen on that this year. The meetings team conducts training sessions for program chairs, and Sig chairs are welcome to join as well. That'll be in, I believe, May, June, and July timeframe this year. And that will give a lot more of the specifics that I'm not going to go into here about how you actually take these submissions and actually get them through the review process, how you create sessions, et cetera, for the annual meeting. The submission review assignments are typically done at the beginning of August with reviews due at the end of August. Again, those dates are not set for this year. You will find out in late August what your session allocation is for the 2022 annual meeting, and we'll talk about the formula for that in just a moment. In September and October, people are getting their accept and reject notices on paper submissions, and you're also working on creating the sessions for the 2022 annual meeting. In January, hopefully January 15th, that's our target every year, we will release the program for the 2022 annual meeting to give folks time to register for the meeting and arrange their travel, et cetera, assuming there is travel. And then during this time, also in January and February, you should be planning on your business meeting and any affiliated reception that you might be having. And the meetings team works with you on that to say, this is the, these are the, options for catering or whatever that might be. I should also mention that when you're creating your sessions, you actually have to request a business meeting as well. Even though you're automatically given one, in your request, you can actually put in additional information about things related to your business meeting. And the meetings team will again go over that with you. One of the final awards that deadlines that Kathy will mention as well is that the deadline for award certificates, plaques, and checks, award checks is February 15, and I will send you many reminders about that as well. I will not go into specifics here, but I want to say in terms of the allocation you get for sessions, there are across the association, all divisions, SIGs, and units, there is a cap of 1,000 symposia and paper sessions that are divided up across the association based on unit membership size. So big divisions and big SIGs get more sessions than get more paper sessions and symposia than small SIGs. Everyone is guaranteed a floor based on their membership. So if you have a SIG of less than 100 members, you're guaranteed one paper session or symposia. And that goes up to 2 if you have between 1 and 200. And I don't know all those specifics, but there is a very specific formula that divides things up equitably across the association. In addition, SIGs are actually given an allocation of posters and roundtables. This is a very complicated slide you're looking at, and the point of this only is to say that there are options that the meetings team will help you work through. So this is an example of a SIG that received 400 session submissions and 200 paper submissions. And this is how they chose to divide up their 40 session submissions and 200 paper submissions. It ended up to be 16 paper and symposia sessions and 42 individual presentations in roundtables and poster sessions. It's all complicated. I don't even understand it, but there is a process that the meetings team will actually help you through, and they will help you then in terms of getting from submissions through your allocation to session creation. And I think now we'll turn it back to Kathy just briefly, and I'll pop back on after that.
All right. And I'm going to talk just a little bit about managing the community. What are best practices to keep the community vibrant? And before I do that, Nathan has a few pointers to share with you.
All right, this is always the point of the presentation where I feel I've popped on too many times, but this is the last time. So I want to give you some information, although you just got elected. It's time to actually start thinking already almost about the 2022 elections. So I wanted to give you the timeline for that. So the election was late this year. COVID really impacted our ability to do things on time, and we were about a month later than we planned. But the general election is in early January, launches in early January every year and closes in early February. And all SIGs that have officers up for election must participate in the AERA election. The elections are conducted electronically. We use an external elections vendor. SIGs cannot hold elections, for example, at their business meeting. All elections need to take place with this external elections vendor. I will help you through the entire process. That's one of my reasons for being here. I will let you know what positions are up for election, or at least the ones I think are. If our records don't match yours, we can work through, figure out who actually needs to be on the ballot. We do have a special election, if need be, in May of every year. The one we'll have one that's about to launch in just a few weeks. We really discourage SIGs from waiting to that special election, simply because you really need to hit the ground running now. And that election, we won't know the results until the end of June. And if you have a critical position like program chair or chair, to leave it vacant until the end of June is really just difficult for the SIGs. We encourage you to really do your best to participate in that October election. Each SIG is required, I skipped a bullet. The terms of office are determined by your SIG bylaws. The maximum across all SIGs is 3 consecutive years. AERA Council has said that no individual can serve in the same SIG role for more than 3 consecutive years. Some of your SIGs have more strict rules saying it's 2 or even 1, but the maximum would be 3. Every SIG is required to have 3 officers at least. Many of your bylaws dictate more. Every SIG has a chair or the equivalent. Every SIG has a secretary or a secretary/treasurer. And every SIG has at least 1 more officer. In many cases, this is a program chair. Most of the time, that's an elected program chair, although there are a handful of SIGs that actually appoint their program chairs. AERA's bylaws dictate that graduate students can only be elected to roles that are designated for graduate students. So for example, graduate student representative. Unfortunately, this means that graduate students cannot hold positions of elected program chairs, elected secretaries. They can, however, serve in appointed positions such as an appointed webmaster. So that's something to keep in mind about how to keep graduate students engaged in the SIG. For your elections, every position that's up for election must have 2 or more candidates. This is required by AERA Council. And in terms of the timeline, you should be thinking about a call for nominations for 2022 as early as July of this year. You may not send it out, but start thinking about that process. I will be in touch with you in August with detailed information about the positions that are up for election. And then I'll follow that up with another email, which is about how to actually create your ballots. And we have an online ballot builder site that I'll help you work with, that I'll help you set up. You need to plan on having your slates of candidates set up by the end of October. I say that, but I always give you a couple extra weeks, but don't count on that, but try your best to get it in by the end of October. And then during that period of November and December, we're actually going through and we verify that everyone who's on the ballot is indeed eligible, meaning that they are a member of your Sig and of AERA. And we use that time just to do some cleanup and testing of the election so that by that first week in January, we're set to launch the election. I want to turn briefly to awards. Each SIG per AERA council can offer up to 3 awards. If you have 3, one of those must be an award that's designated for a graduate student. The SIG Executive Committee spends lots of time looking at award petitions. And so there's a formal process for getting an award approved. And that is on this, there's a petition form on the Resources for Sig Officers webpage. When we get a petition, it first comes to me. I usually take a look at it to make sure everything looks, good. And if it does, it gets forwarded to the SIG Executive Committee. The SIG Executive Committee reviews it. They may kick it back to you. In most cases, they do, and say, can you make a couple edits, or have you thought about this, or or this is not in line with policies, whatever it might be. Once the SIG Executive Committee is satisfied that it meets all the criteria, that the requirements are correct, it gets forwarded on to the AERA Executive Board, which has the authority to actually approve new award petitions. The Executive Board meets in January, June, and October each year. So those are the only 3 opportunities each year to get an award approved. Because of that, it can take some time to wend through the system. One of the things the SIG Executive Committee has done recently is they created a new form, a new petition form, and we're really hopeful that that will streamline the process, and so it's not as much back and forth. So it'll be really clear from the beginning what is actually required in each section of the award petition. If you're doing an award, feel free to reach out to me or members of the SIG Executive Committee. I'm more than happy to answer questions in advance if that means we can streamline that process for you of getting an award approved. And finally, once again, that deadline, if you do have an approved award, the deadline for certificates and plaques and check requests is February 15. Very briefly also, as I mentioned before, each of your SIGs has a set of bylaws under which it operates. If you do not have the bylaws for your SIG, email me at sigs@aera.net, and I will send you the latest copy of your bylaws. The bylaws that are on file have been approved by AERA Council. There is a process which is unfortunately currently on hold. We really need to take a look at bylaws across divisions and SIGs. There are certain things in boilerplate that really need to be reviewed by our legal counsel and perhaps updated. And then I would like to start a process this year. I'm not sure if we have the bandwidth to do so, but start a process where we actually one by one review with SIGs their current bylaws. Many of you have bylaws that have interim changes that you're operating under. And eventually those will need to be formally approved with a vote of your SIG membership using our external elections vendor. So as I said, that process is on hold, but if there's something about your SIG that is not working, for example, if you have officer terms that are 1 year and you just find it unworkable to be continually in an election cycle, we can on an interim basis work with you to change those bylaws to allow you to at least function on an interim basis with a revised officer structure that's going to be supportive to your SIG. The goal really is to make it, we don't want this to be a barrier, but we do need to approach this revision process quite thoroughly and thoughtfully. So that's just something to keep in mind. And I think this is my last slide. The final thing I wanted to mention is that each year SIGs are required to submit an annual report, and I send it to the outgoing and incoming chairs if you're in a transition year, or if it's just you're not, it'll just go to the one person. But that SIG annual report is due back on June 15. I will send it to you no later than May 15. It's an online form that you complete. I'll tell you in advance when you get the email. These are the things you need to have ready when you submit the form. And as I said earlier, it's really a great way for the SIG Executive Committee to really get a sense of what you've been doing throughout the year, not in a punitive oversight kind of way, but it's really, and I have to say this, across the association, we have seen amazing things happening in this pandemic year. We have seen such creative programming by divisions and SIGs. And Felice and I have just been so impressed with everything that's happening. And these annual report forms are really a great way to share what you've been doing. And I'd like to, thinking about ways that perhaps we can highlight these to other SIGs so that there's a creative sharing of ideas. I'm probably getting into Kathy's slide there, but that's just something I've been thinking about. The other final thing to mention is that if you are going to change your dues structure for 2022, whether that's an increase or a decrease, that's actually part of this annual report form. So just make sure you get that back to me by the June 15 deadline so that we can get that in place before the new membership year opens on October 1. And that is it. I will turn it to Kathy.
Thank you, Nathan. And this first bullet, I think, is very appropriate. Succession planning and longer terms for officers can be beneficial. Over and over again, it's been put out there how much information really is you need to know, and various deadlines that you have to meet and so on. And so planning for that passover of information through succession planning and perhaps longer terms of office can be really helpful for that. It's also important to consider how to recruit succession slates. Listservs are a great avenue for doing that. It's very important to figure out a way to work on that early on so that you're not find yourself in the start of January and you don't have your people, your candidates thought through and gotten. Ensure those managing awards process attend to the timeline. So plaques, certificates are ready for business meetings. We could put this out there as a quiz. What is the deadline for the plaques and awards to be submitted? And obviously it's February 15th. And that's really important. And one of the pieces to help manage that is like when you put in a request for a particular award, you want to start an award. As part of that process, you have to put the timeline into your proposal. So you might want to check back in those papers. Officer monthly conference call meetings, consider including past chair on the calls. Some SIGs do not have it that often. However, with the pandemic and the use of Team and Zoom and perhaps other avenues, I think that there have been opportunities to have more frequent meetings in an easier way. Maintain documentation of activities, decisions, meeting minutes. This is really important. That final report was mentioned, and by your document in a very organized and easily accessible way throughout the year will make that final report just very easy, and the opposite if you don't have them in an organized manner. So just as a summary checklist for healthy and vital SIGs, you want to think about, are you building community? And if so, how are you doing it? You want to think about, are you familiar with and attentive to the rules and regulations from SIG bylaws and handbooks? Just going there and becoming familiar with that information can, in the long run, save you a lot of time. Forgetting to do something, you're not going down a wrong path that's going to cause you some hassles. Are you frequently communicating with the Sig Executive Committee and AERA staff when issues arise? When I was president of one of the SIGs or chair of one of the SIGs that I belong to, I frequently reached out to people like Nathan or others to answer questions. So please don't hesitate to do that. Are you using social media or other communication as building community? That's really an important avenue. And social media certainly, but I think within some of the SIGs that I have been a part of, key has been a newsletter that has been coming out periodically during the year. It was a great way to highlight information and let people know what other SIG members are doing and their accomplishments. It just seemed like it was something that SIG members really valued. And I heard that about that SIG that I now belong to but no longer chair. I heard those comments this year. Are you circulating the leadership? That was mentioned before, that you want to involve people. You don't want the same people doing the same thing over and over again. One avenue that worked in one of the SIGs for doing that was to keep on the chair as an advisor the year after they served as chair, so that it helped the new person coming in to be familiar with the ropes of the role and without burdening them. So that made it easier to circulate the leadership. Okay, back to you, Nathan.
So Nathan, we have some questions that were posted in the chat. So should I start with those?
Sure, it sounds great.
Okay, so there were a couple of questions that were around communication and social media. One of the first ones was around Twitter. So you mentioned that there are some bylaws and so forth around the use of social media, but there was a question about a SIG that apparently has a Twitter page, but the current leadership doesn't know who controls it. The site hasn't been updated since 2017. Does anybody have any recommendations or advice?
That's a tough one, because those are externally set up and controlled by SIGs. And so I would recommend trying, and I can help you figure out who were officers at that last time that it seemed to be updated. We could see if anyone has access to, any of those former officers have access, but it's not something that I can actually get to at the central office either. And that's another reason for these websites. I said that it's better to have it on the AERA platform. This is just a really good example of that.
Yeah, yeah. Another question was about the listservs. How do SIG officers actually get access to the listserv? How does that work?
So I actually give you access. I sent on it. I have to say, first of all, and you've all probably found this, AERA email ends in spam, or where you just get so much of it, you miss it. So I know sometimes things go out and you don't see it, and that's not a problem. I'm more than happy to resend stuff. But I think you all got a letter from me it said, welcome to new SIG officers, and actually had the email address for your listserv. If you didn't see this, just send me an email at sigs@aera.net, and I'll send you the information about what your listserv address is. We put you on there automatically. You don't get a confirmation from us that says you've now been added, but you are there. And you'll know instantly if you're not, because if you try to email your SIG members, you'll get a message that says you are not authorized to email this listserv. So if you ever get that, just email me at sigs@aera.net. You will find I typically answer emails right away. If I don't answer it right away, that means if it's been 2 days, I obviously dropped the ball, so email me again. But we'll get that to you right away.
And you said that was sigs@email.net?
sigs@aera.net.
At aera.net. Okay.
And I want to actually, can I just do one thing real quick, Michelle?
Sure.
Gail, I think it was, had a suggestion that I liked. I want to show you just real quick. She said for visual learners, it helps to see where things are on the AERA website. Let me just take one quick minute and show you where things are. Let's see if I can.
Great.
Right. All right. You should be looking at the AERA webpage. So at the very top, there's this little button here, Sigs. If you click on Sigs, it's going to take you to some options here. First of all, there is the Sig Directory, which I also forgot to mention, but that is where all of your SIGs are listed. Take a look at that and make sure the listing is correct. The new chair will not be listed until May 1. It's tied to my database, which, because the meeting's at a different time every year, we just default to a May 1 date for when the database updates. So you will see the new chair on May 1 on the website. This other thing you can find is the resources for SIG officers. This is the one that I mentioned, where there's a lot of things. There's a Sig Handbook, this is information about how to get to your membership and financial tools, which I'll show you in a moment. A publications manual, which this relates to if you wanted to have a SIG journal or a book series or whatever it might be. That's the information you would need. Information about websites and social media, including that social media guidelines and best practices document I mentioned. Here's the petition for an AERA approved award, your expense and reimbursement form. So that's all right here in this resources for SIG officers page. The other thing is if you log in at the top of the screen, this login button, and I will not do it because I'm a staff member, you actually see radically different things I will see that you won't see what I see basically, but if you log in at the top of that page, that's where you get to the information about your membership lists and your financial reports.
All right, thanks so much. We had one other question that was kind of around this whole communication issue, and that was after Kathy's presentation about the different types of tools that are available today. Someone asked whether or not AERA has a Teams account for the organization.
No, we do not.
All right, so moving on to program planning, we had a couple of questions about co-sponsoring sessions with other groups in order to provide greater visibility for the sessions. However, they've been told by past leadership that co-sponsoring sessions count as a full session toward the allocation of both sponsors, which is a distinctive to co-sponsor. So can you give a little bit more information, Nathan, on how that works?
So this is something that Robert can cover or will cover for you when you are doing the trainings for program chairs. I think there's a lot more flexibility than what it sounded like there. I know I don't think it counts as a session, a full session for both, but I honestly don't know exactly how it works. It would seem to me that that wouldn't make sense, because if multiple SIGs, we encourage SIGs to co-sponsor events because it helps bring a wider attention to and a bigger audience to sessions. So I would say that that's a good question for our meetings director, Robert Smith, and that's his email is rsmith, R-S-M-I-T-H @aera.net. I'll put that in the chat as well. I'm sorry I don't have a better answer, but at least you're going to the person who can answer it best.
And that answers another of the questions in the chat, which was whether or not there would be training sessions for the new program chairs on how to operate the AERA system. So
I think actually that program chair role, for those of you who are new to SIGs, I think it's actually one of the hardest ones, just because there's so much to learn in the beginning. Once you've done it, I think it gets easier, but there's a lot of stuff that you have to, that gets thrown at you in the early days of being a SIG officer. So I would definitely take advantage of those trainings. They have videos that they've done. They've got a wealth of resources in that all academic system, which is the submission and review system. So while it may seem a bit daunting and scary because you don't know what you're doing, there's people to support you, and there's training materials to support you in doing that.
all right. Okay, we had a couple of questions that focused on either elections, orientations, or transitions. One of the first ones was, I have not received any communication at all from my SIG. What should I do?
Your current SIG chair is listed, well, it could be the outgoing, is listed in that Sig Directory. So after May 1, you'll have the current SIG chair will be listed there. If you haven't heard anything, just email me and I can help put you all in touch as well. It's a crazy time, as you all know, both in semesters at your jobs as well as at AERA. And so I think emails sometimes didn't get noticed. I know a couple of people missed election result emails. So if there's anything you don't know and you need help on, just email me and I'm more than happy to help. I hope you will find that I'm here as a resource for you. I want to make sure you're successful.
Thanks, Nathan. Another question, and I think this was about the elected positions. Does that mean that if there's only one candidate, that they are automatically awarded a position?
No. So if there's only one candidate, the slate doesn't run in the election. So those are typically the cases where SIGs participate in a special election because they just weren't able to get more than one candidate. I will say it's been a real challenge this year, more so than ever. I just think that you all are just stretched to the utmost. And so it definitely was harder in many SIGs to get people to step up and volunteer for what can be, quite a bit of work. So we're trying to be flexible as we can, but if you miss out and you end up with no one in the election or the special election, whether it's only one candidate or none, yes, there are some options that I can talk to you offline about what we can do. There is some I have some flexibility and can work with you on, if you have to do a special appointment, if we have to, leave a term, officer position vacant, whatever it might be, there's ways that we can work with you one-on-one. The goal is to have it be an election just because that's the best way for your SIG members to express their voice about who they want to have in leadership in the SIG. But if it's simply not possible, reach out to me. I'm happy to help you in whatever way I can.
Another question that has to do with elections and orientations was whether or not there would be training for new treasurers.
So it's probably the most least defined role, and I find it's probably handled very differently in every SIG. There's not a lot to do technically as a treasurer, because the your SIGs do have budgets. So you have basically anyone who belongs to your SIG pays member dues, as you know. Those monies go into an account for you at AERA. So when you go online and look at that financial report, that's your pot of money. It's AERA, central office doesn't touch it. We don't, the only thing that we do is each SIG is charged as a maintenance fee each year, which covers things like IT technical support for you. It covers probably a portion of my salary. It covers space at the annual meeting. It covers, hosting your SIG website, the listservs, and it's a nominal fee. It's, I can't remember the exact amounts, but it's really a very small amount that each SIG pays back to AERA. Your other funds are yours to use. We don't dictate how you use those, except to say it must be in accordance with the Sig Handbook. So your job as a treasurer really is just minimal to monitor what monies do we have, how is it being spent, and then to report out, for example, at your business meeting to your members about how the funds were spent for the year. And the other thing is the reimbursement form that you have. Typically, I see that Sig Treasurer is the one that sends those to me, or the Sig Chair. One thing to keep in mind with that expense reimbursement form is you cannot, by IRS law, authorize an expenditure to yourself. So if you have paid for something out of pocket, you must have another Sig officer actually sign the form. And in this digital era, just simply typing in a name seems to suffice. Accounting doesn't seem to have an issue with that. So I would say that's in a nutshell what you would do as a treasurer. But again, if there's something you didn't cover, we can talk offline, either on a Zoom or a phone, or I think probably half of you probably already have my cell phone number. So I'm always happy to help you.
We had another question about whether or not they could have access to past annual reports.
I saw that question pop up in the chat, and I'm going to see what I can do. I want to give you a link to last year's report, because I know for certainty many of you will then answer that one instead of this one when it comes time to do the report. But I think I might try to just give you maybe a little more heads up before the 15th about what it is that you'll actually be asked to do. It really is not a heavy lift. It's if, as one of the folks here talked about, if you've kept records throughout the year, it should be relatively easy to do. But it's like asking for things like, did you have an agenda for your business meeting? Can you attach that form? How many people came to your business meeting? Last year is a dreadful example, because in 2020, the meeting didn't happen. And we basically did like a very abbreviated version of the annual report. So I think going back to 2019 is probably more accurate. I am trying to work with Calvin Spivey, who's our governance associate. Calvin and I are going to be working this week on updating that, and I want to add in a couple new fields or tweak some questions. So what exists now will be a little different than what you'll see in a couple of weeks.
Can I come in there at the moment? Sorry, I was going to say that the business meetings this year as well could be slightly problematic, because there was a lot of difficult challenges with the business meetings on trying to get on the platform for AERA, and so many of them had to swap from going from the platform to Zoom and all things like that. So people were lost on the way. So that may not also be an accurate account for people to put into the report. I just thought I'd mention that if I may.
That's really good to keep in mind, Victoria. Thank you.
And Nathan, I was also going to ask if you could reiterate where the form could be seen before, just to gain an idea of the kind of documentation they need for that report, so they have an idea, these are the things.
I think what I might do is put something out via email this week to say, these are the fields. I don't think we're quite ready to launch the report, but I think the more heads up I can give you, the easier that will be. It'll take away some of the anxiety of what do I have to have ready and when's it due. So I'll try to do that this week.
And Nathan, I would just say, this is Veronica, and I would just say also for the business meetings, if there's a way also to capture alternatives that SIGs use to be able to communicate the same information that's communicated in the business meetings, that would also be helpful.
It's a great idea. Yeah, it was unfortunate that the technical issues really, that were happening at the meeting really seemed to really impact business meetings, even more so than some other types of sessions. And then those that did happen, our platform, for some reason, put them in formats that we did not want them in. So there were other business meetings that were forced to deliver a business meeting in a webinar format, which is not ever what our intention was. So that unfortunately really limited the amount of interaction. And maybe I'll create a space within the annual meeting report this year, the annual report this year, to just allow you to give a bit of feedback about what some of those challenges were.
And I think kudos to the chairs and their teams who devised alternative means such as Zoom, because I know that took a lot extra and a lot of them did go that route.
Yeah, and some have done follow-up with newsletters and other kind of means by which they communicated the information that they normally provide in a business meeting. So that's kind of also what I was meaning by alternatives.
Yeah, great. So Nathan, we have another question about secretary duties, whether or not they're outlined in the ARA rules and policies, and if you could give just a brief overview.
So again, those would really vary by SIG. I think that's one of the really important reasons why you want to get together with as an executive committee within your SIG sooner rather than later, so each person understands what their roles are. It varies by SIG, and it really varies by what you're doing in your SIG. Some of the small SIGs, it could be just that you're taking some minutes at a meeting and then maybe assisting the chair with some events at the annual meeting. Some of the large SIGs with a lot more activities, your roles could be much more in depth. So really that's something that you would determine in concert either with the outgoing or the current leadership of the SIG.
This may be a very similar answer from you, Nathan, but we had a question about how subcommittees work within a SIG.
I would say, again, that is completely up to the SIG. I don't know if anyone in the SIG EC wants to comment if you've been in a SIG that had subcommittees. I typically have less interaction at that level, and I'm not really sure how it's worked.
I'll say something. Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So I've been on the leadership team for a couple of SIGs actually. One which was the research for Black, the focus on Black research. I was on there, and I was a program chair, and I was also the secretary and treasurer for that particular one. And that was a very large SIG, and so we did have quite a few different meetings. And one, we had a communications meeting subgroup, which was really good. We had a subgroup which also looked at various events as well. And then we also had the group which just really focused down on growing the business. They all interacted with each other, but they were able to just go away and do different things and come back and meet as a whole group. Another one which I was on as well, if I may just say a few more things, is just the leadership and social justice group. I was the nominations person for that, officer for that particular one. Now, it wasn't a inscribed role, but it was a nominations, and it was pretty important. But it all depends how the chair decides on the importance of the particular subgroup which you're working with. That was seen as a very important one because it was really about growing the membership from postdocs as well all the way through. So they saw that nominations committee role as a really important one. And the one which I'm on at the present moment, I was the secretary and treasurer, and now the program chair, which I have been for a couple of years, which is the International Studies SIG. And we meet very regularly, and we also have some subgroups as well. And the subgroup which we've got is the communications and media, where they do all the stuff around social media and that, again, as part of growing the meeting. And all of those particular SIGs which I've been involved with have been very, very fruitful, very progressive, and with a focus of how we ensure that we get membership and the membership actually stays with us. So hopefully that gives you an insight onto 3 different SIGs that I've been involved with.
Thanks, Victoria.
Can I just add something real quick as well,
Sure.
Michelle?
Yeah.
So I think, you know, obviously every SIG will function differently. They have different sizes and different, you know, abilities and bandwidth and all these kinds of things. But I think one thing that's really important if you're a new officer, especially, is we found it extremely useful in the SIG that I've been a part of to just have a separate space where you're cataloging all of this stuff, right? So, you know, and I think some of the questions that were asked of Nathan today and during kind of the presentation are actually things that the SIG itself will have to answer and sort of identify. And so a few years ago in the SIG that I'm involved with, we just started a Google Doc. I mean, it obviously doesn't have to be a Google Drive, but it could be something else, but that just provides longevity and continuity. And it includes things like position responsibilities, like what positions are there. And then within that document, it provided a timeline for each officer, because as we know with timelines and deadlines, things get a little crazy. So we did it things by quarterly, right? For the chair, in terms of quarterly, what things are chair responsible for, what's this treasurer, secretary, etc. So whatever officer positions that you have within your bylaw, just even breaking it down and organizing it in those ways really, really helps, whether you have subcommittees or not, that just having a running, even if it's just one document somewhere that multiple people can access, that provides that longevity, rather than every time an election happens, people having to now reinvent the wheel, ask Nathan again for all of this information. Just having it on the back end is really helpful.
Yeah, that's awesome advice. Thanks so much, Jane. That's really great. So we had a couple of questions about awards as well. One of them, Nathan, was whether or not longstanding awards are reviewed each year or if they're reviewed at all.
No, once you get approval by the AERA Executive Board, that's it. You can operate under that structure that was laid out in that petition for as long as you want. We don't re-review them unless, I mean, there may periodically down the road be a time when we look at all AERA awards, but it's not something we routinely do. If you make substantive changes to the award, for example, if you change the criteria or the focus of the award, that does require the approval again of the Sig Executive Committee and then ultimately AERA Executive Boards. If you're going to make changes, let me know what they are. And if it's just something minor, like you're tweaking a description, well, that's something we can just say, sure, that's fine. But otherwise, you know, we can help you with that petition process. I should say also that I have many of the approved petitions. When I started in this role in January of 2019, I discovered that there was no central repository of approved award petitions. And so I've gone back in time to recreate that. There are a handful of your petitions that I still have not located. I've not given up hope. I've been meaning, of course, to look through paper files, but since I haven't been to the office since 2019, I'm a little stuck there. So once I return to the office, and I actually work remotely all the time anyway, so once I'm able to return to the office, you know, for my next visit, I will try to see what I can dredge up in terms of those missing paper forms. But if you need to know what was approved, just let me know and I can send you a copy of that document as well.
And the second question with regard to awards is whether or not there are shared rubrics and procedures for SIG awards.
Does someone on the committee want to take that one?
I would just say that there aren't specific rubrics, but the SIG Executive Committee, in reviewing the proposals, encourages very specific criteria for who should get the award. So we really want you to lay that out very clearly.
Including the rubric that is not the same as the rubric you use to accept papers for within your SIG. You know, it has to be very specific to what makes that paper or product exceptional. And the rubric is very helpful for that. But we don't have one.
We had one more question that was submitted in the chat, and that is, if we want to add graduate students, when do we start this process?
If you want to add graduate students as in appointed roles, I'm assuming that question is. If that's the case, it's really up to the SIG to on a timeline that works for you. Sooner is better rather than later, just because you're preparing for the 2022 annual meeting. But for any of your appointed positions, do send me the name, the affiliation, and the email address once you know who that person is going to be. And it's typically the SIG chair makes the appointment based on advice from the SIG's Executive Committee. That's typically the model that we see But once that's done, just let me know. I'll put them in our database so that I can give them the access to the listserv, to whatever it might be that they need to do their job.
And Rachel put a little bit of clarifying information regarding your question in the chat, Nathan. Whether there's a difference between appointed and elected.
So in terms of what they do, there may not be a difference between an elected and appointed position. We see some positions in some SIGs that are elected in the same position, doing the same thing, and another SIG is appointed. I think it's just however your bylaws were set up in terms of what has to be elected and what can be appointed. So once again, you would just go back to your bylaws and see what that is, and then I can, once they're appointed, I'll give them the rights that they need. But again, the timeline is yours to determine.
All right, are there any other questions? I was just looking at the time, Nathan. I'm not sure that we have time for the small group breakouts.
Yeah, we ran a little bit longer than we thought, and then we just stayed in the large group. But I would also say if you have follow-up questions that you didn't ask, that you feel more comfortable talking about in a small group, I'm always available. I don't want to volunteer the members of the Sig EC, but I can guarantee you at least one of them would be available to ask questions one-on-one if there are things that, you may have inherited, like a really difficult situation in your SIG, and you may want to have a frank conversation about that. We're all here to help you. It's, our jobs are to support you. I mean, I think sometimes we're seen as, the policies and procedures, which, yeah, that's part of what we do, but we're also here to make sure that your area of research interest is supported and nurtured and creates a really vital and healthy space for your members. And so whatever we can do to make that happen, we're here to help you with that.
If you happen to then overnight think about another question, we have another session tomorrow. You can join us tomorrow.
That is correct.
It's a wonderful situation. I mean, if you're very, very new, it's great. It just helps you to really understand what AERA is about when you really come to a lot of the different work and know what the different work is. So I would say to you, enjoy the role and enjoy the SIG.
And I would say that because AERA is such a large organization, that the SIGs really are the place to hang out with your people. I mean, I loved that aspect of them.
And yes, we will be sending out the PowerPoint and with a link to or instructions on how to get the recording.
It'll probably be late this week. Badut Asharia, our IT systems administrator, is going to take a look at the recordings and see which one is best, and then post it on YouTube, and we'll send you a link to that. Or actually, it might be posted in that members only portion of our website. So we will get that to you.
Yeah. Well, a big thank you to all of our panelists today and our ASL interpreters. We appreciated all of your questions as well, everybody. And as Nathan said, feel free to get in touch.
And thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Nathan. See you soon.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.